My name is David. I'm 73 years old now, and I'm sitting here in a small apartment I can barely afford, looking back at a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. Someone younger. Someone who believed with his whole heart that he was doing the right thing. Someone who gave everything he had to an organization that promised him meaning, purpose, and eternal life, and left him with nothing but regrets and questions he was never supposed to ask. This is my story. It's not easy to tell, but I need to tell it. Maybe for myself. Maybe for the young people who are standing where I once stood, wide-eyed and eager, ready to sacrifice everything. I don't know if anyone will listen. I don't even know if it matters anymore. But I need to say it out loud, just once. I gave my entire life to Bethel, and I was wrong. I need to say that I'm not angry. Not anymore. Anger burned out years ago, leaving behind something heavier, something harder to carry. Regret. The kind that settles into your bones and doesn't leave. The kind that wakes you up at 3 in the morning and won't let you go back to sleep. I grew up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where nothing much happened, and where the Kingdom Hall was the center of our entire world. My parents were witnesses. My father became one when I was just a baby, and my mother followed soon after. I don't remember a time when the organization wasn't part of my life. It was the air I breathed, the rhythm of my weeks, the lens through which I understood everything. Our town had maybe 3,000 people. One main street. A diner where the same families ate every Sunday after church. A post office. A hardware store that my uncle ran. A couple of churches, Methodist, Baptist, Catholic. And our Kingdom Hall. It was a simple building, nothing fancy. Beige siding, a small parking lot, a sign out front that said, Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. But to us, it was everything. We met 3 times a week, Tuesday night for the theocratic ministry school, Thursday night for the service meeting, and twice on Sunday. My childhood memories aren't of birthday parties or school friends. They're of sitting in uncomfortable chairs, trying to stay still during 2-hour meetings, coloring in the margins of the Watchtower magazine while the brothers droned on about prophecy and persecution and paradise. I remember the smell of that building. Old carpet, coffee from the back room, the perfume the older sisters wore. My father was serious about the truth. He'd been raised Catholic, drifted away as a young man, and found the Witnesses in his late 20s. He always said they were the only religion that made sense, the only one that used the Bible. He was zealous in a quiet way. Never missed a meeting. Always prepared his comments. Went out in service every Saturday morning without fail. My mother was softer. She became a witness because she loved my father, I think. She believed, but it was gentler with her. She'd hug me when I was scared about Armageddon. She'd tell me Jehovah loved me, that everything would be okay. But she never pushed back against my father's strictness. She never questioned. But it wasn't all boring or oppressive. There was a warmth to it, too. The congregation was our family. Everyone looked out for each other. After meetings, we'd stand around in the parking lot for an hour, talking, laughing. The older sisters would bring homemade cookies wrapped in tinfoil. The kids would run around in the grass until their parents finally dragged them to the car. For a kid growing up in the middle of nowhere, it felt like belonging. It felt like safety. I didn't have many friends at school. Witness kids never really did. We couldn't celebrate holidays. Couldn't say the Pledge of Allegiance. Couldn't participate in sports or after-school activities because they conflicted with meetings. So we were different. Outsiders. I got used to sitting by myself at lunch, to being the weird kid who didn't do Christmas or birthdays. But at the Kingdom Hall, I belonged. I was part of something. I mattered. And then there was Bethel. Even the word sounded holy to me. I must have been 7 or 8 when I first heard about it, the world headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. Brother Thompson, a traveling overseer, came to give a talk at our hall, and he'd served there for 10 years. He was tall, dignified, spoke with this calm authority that made you want to listen. He told stories about the printeries, the binderies, the thousands of brothers and sisters working together in perfect unity, producing literature that was being sent all over the world. He described the massive buildings, the tight schedules, the privilege of being at the very heart of Jehovah's organization. He talked about eating meals with members of the governing body, about seeing them walk through the halls, about being part of something truly sacred. I remember sitting there, a scrawny kid with a cowlick I could never tame, wearing a tie that was too big for me, and thinking, that's what serving God really looks like. He showed slides. Black and white photographs of the Watchtower buildings, the factories, the dining halls filled with hundreds of people. It looked impressive, important, like being part of something that mattered on a global scale. From that moment on, Bethel wasn't just a place. It was a calling. It was what faithful young men did. It was the pinnacle, the ultimate expression of dedication. And even though New York felt impossibly far away, like another planet, I started to dream about it. Not in a vague, someday kind of way. In a real, burning, I'm going to do that when I grow up way. My parents encouraged it. Of course they did. What witness parent wouldn't be proud to have their son serve at Bethel? My father would talk about it like it was the greatest thing a person could achieve. If you can make it to Bethel, he'd say, you'll have succeeded in life. Nothing else will matter. The whole congregation encouraged it. Every time there was a talk about full-time service, every time there was an experience shared about someone who left everything behind to work at headquarters, I felt it. That pull. That certainty that this was what Jehovah wanted for me. I wasn't unique. Lots of boys in our congregation had the same dream. Jimmy Peterson wanted to go. So did Mark Williams. We'd talk about it sometimes after meetings, what it would be like, what we'd do there, how amazing it would be. But most of them grew out of it. They got interested in girls. They got jobs at the local factory. They stayed local, got married, had kids, settled into normal witness life. But I didn't. I held on to it. Tight. Tighter than anything else in my life. Because I genuinely believed that serving at Bethel was the highest thing a person could do with their life. It became my identity before I even understood what that meant. By the time I was a teenager, the dream had solidified into something more than childish fantasy. It had become my identity. I was the kid who was going to Bethel. Everyone knew it. I knew it. And I shaped my entire life around that goal. High school was difficult for me. Not academically. I did fine in my classes. But socially. I felt like I was living in two worlds that didn't connect. At school, kids talked about college, about careers, about their futures. They applied to universities. They joined clubs. They went to dances. And I just existed on the periphery. I remember being 14, sitting in the school cafeteria, and some of the guys were talking about what they wanted to be when they grew up. One wanted to be a mechanic like his dad. Another wanted to join the military. Someone else wanted to be a veterinarian. They asked me, and I said without hesitation, I'm going to serve at Bethel. They looked at me like I was speaking another language. What's that? One of them asked. It's the headquarters for my religion. In New York. I'm going to work there. Like, as a job? No. As a volunteer. To serve God. The conversation moved on. They didn't understand. And maybe I didn't explain it well. But the truth was, to them, life was about building something for yourself. A career, a family, a future. But I'd been taught that all of that was temporary. Worthless, even. The world was ending. Armageddon was just around the corner. Why waste time building a life in a system that was about to be destroyed? The organization made it very clear. Higher education was a trap. College was where faith went to die. It was full of worldly philosophies, immorality, dangerous thinking. They'd show statistics at assemblies. How many young people left the truth after going to university? They'd tell stories about brothers who got degrees and then abandoned Jehovah for careers and money. I remember one circuit assembly when I was 16. The speaker was a Bethel elder, and he spent 45 minutes warning against higher education. He said universities were breeding grounds for evolution, atheism, sexual immorality. He said Satan used education to lure young people away from the truth. He asked, what good is a degree if you lose your faith? What profit is there in gaining the whole world but losing your soul? And everyone nodded. My parents nodded. I nodded. It made sense to me. Why would I spend 4 years studying something that wouldn't matter in the new world? Why would I burden myself with debt and temptation when I could be using that time to serve God? The end was coming soon. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10. Getting a degree was like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So I made the decision. No college. No career. Bethel. My high school guidance counselor tried to talk to me about it once. Mrs. Henderson. She was kind, not pushy. She just said, "David, you're a smart kid. You could do well in college. Have you thought about what you want to study?" I smiled politely and said, "I appreciate that, but I'm not going to college. I'm going to serve at Bethel." What's Bethel? It's hard to explain. It's where I'm supposed to be. She didn't push it. But I saw the concern in her eyes. She didn't understand. How could she? She didn't know Jehovah. She didn't understand that I wasn't giving up anything. I was gaining everything. The pressure to go to Bethel wasn't just internal. Every year, there were announcements at the circuit assemblies about the need for more workers at headquarters. They'd talk about expansion projects, new printeries, new facilities. They'd emphasize that it was a privilege, that not everyone was called, but that those who were should respond without hesitation. I remember one talk in particular. I must have been 17. The speaker was an older brother named Brother Richardson who'd spent 30 years at Bethel. He was thin, gray-haired, spoke with this intense conviction that made you sit up straight. He talked about the joy of serving alongside thousands of brothers and sisters, all united in one purpose. He talked about the meals they shared, the theocratic routine, the sense of being part of something bigger than yourself. He talked about waking up every morning knowing that your work was directly contributing to the preaching work, to the salvation of people all over the world. And then he said something I'll never forget. "Brothers and sisters, if you have the opportunity to serve at Bethel, don't let anything hold you back. Not comfort. Not relationships. Not plans. Not the voice of Satan whispering in your ear that you need security, that you need a backup plan. Jehovah is calling you to the most important work in the universe. Will you answer?" I felt like he was talking directly to me. I felt like Jehovah himself was calling me. And I wasn't going to say no. After the assembly, I told my father I wanted to apply as soon as I graduated. He looked at me with this expression of pride I'd never seen before. "I'm proud of you, son," he said. "You're making the right choice." And I believed him. I believed all of it. When I turned 18, I graduated high school with decent grades. Some of my classmates were heading off to state universities. A few were joining the workforce. One guy I knew, Derek Miller, got a scholarship to play football at Penn State. People congratulated him like he'd won the lottery. And me? I applied to Bethel. The application process was rigorous. You had to have a certain number of hours in field service each month. I was averaging 70. You had to be in good standing with your congregation. You had to have recommendations from your elders. You had to be willing to commit to at least a year, though most stayed much longer. You had to be healthy, single or married with no children, and willing to live communally under strict rules. I met all the requirements. I was regular in service. I was a ministerial servant, appointed when I was 17, which was young. I had no romantic entanglements. I'd avoided dating because I wanted to stay focused. My parents were proud. The elders were proud. The congregation was proud. But there was one thing I had to confront, the finality of my choice. I had a friend, his name was Michael, who'd grown up in the same congregation. We were close, like brothers. We'd gone door to door together since we were kids. We'd sat through the same meetings, the same assemblies, the same talks about staying faithful. But Michael's parents weren't witnesses. His mom was, but his dad wasn't. And his dad had been pressuring him to go to college, to have something to fall back on. Michael struggled with it. I could see it eating at him. The pull between what the organization taught and what his father wanted. The fear of making the wrong choice. We talked about it a lot that summer after graduation. We'd meet at the diner, order coffee, sit in a booth for hours just talking. "I don't know what to do," he said one night. "My dad says I'm throwing my life away. He says the religion is controlling me." "Your dad doesn't understand the truth," I told him. "He doesn't see what we see." But what if he's right? What if we're wrong? I remember feeling this surge of frustration. "Michael, we're not wrong. This is the truth. You know that. You've seen the prophecies. You've seen how corrupt the world is. Armageddon is coming. Why would you waste time on a degree that won't matter?" He looked at me with these tired eyes. I need to be practical, David. I need to have a life." Those words stung. "You'll have a life in the new world. A perfect one. Forever." Eventually, he gave in. He enrolled at a community college to study engineering. His mom was devastated. The elders counseled him. The congregation whispered. And I pulled away from him. Not consciously, maybe. But I did. Because he'd made his choice, and I'd made mine, and they weren't compatible. Within 2 years, he'd stopped coming to meetings altogether. The elders would point to him as an example during talks. "See what happens when you pursue higher education. See how quickly someone can fall away." And I thought, I won't be Michael. I won't be weak. So I doubled down. I worked part-time at the hardware store my uncle owned, just enough to save a little money for incidentals. I spent every other waking moment in service, at meetings, studying. I cut off anything that could distract me. There was a girl at the hall, Sarah, who I liked. She was a year younger than me, quiet, pretty, serious about the truth. I'm pretty sure she liked me too. I'd catch her looking at me during meetings. She'd find reasons to talk to me after service. But I never pursued it. I told myself there'd be time for that later. After Bethel. Maybe in the new world. Maybe. I didn't realize it then, but I was already sacrificing pieces of myself. Piece by piece. Relationship by relationship. Dream by dream. Possibility by possibility. And I did it gladly, because I thought I was trading temporary things for eternal ones. I thought I was being mature. Spiritual. Wise beyond my years. I was just a kid who didn't know any better. When I got my acceptance letter from Bethel, it was like winning the lottery. No, it was better than that. It was validation. Proof that Jehovah had seen my efforts and approved. Proof that I mattered. I remember opening the envelope at the kitchen table. It was a Saturday morning. My mother was making breakfast. My father was reading the Watchtower magazine. I'd been checking the mailbox obsessively for weeks. The letter was typed on official Watchtower letterhead. Formal. Brief. Dear Brother Keller, we are pleased to inform you that your application to serve at Bethel has been approved. Your arrival date is scheduled for August 15th. Please find enclosed further instructions. My hands shook. My mother saw my face and knew immediately. She cried. Actually cried. Happy tears. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. My father stood up, walked over, and shook my hand. Firmly. Like I was a man now, not a boy. "I'm proud of you, son," he said. And I felt 10 feet tall. The announcement was made at the Kingdom Hall the following Sunday. After the closing prayer, the presiding overseer asked everyone to remain seated. He said, "Brothers and sisters, we have some wonderful news to share. One of our young brothers has been accepted to serve at Bethel." A murmur went through the congregation. Everyone knew who it was before he said my name. Brother David Keller will be leaving for Brooklyn next month. Let's show our appreciation for his willingness to serve Jehovah full-time. Applause. Genuine, enthusiastic applause. People stood up. Some of the older sisters dabbed at their eyes with tissues. After the meeting, I was swarmed. Everyone wanted to shake my hand, hug me, congratulate me. The older sisters called me, "Such a fine young man." The elders clapped me on the back and said things like, "You're setting a wonderful example," and "Jehovah will surely bless you." The younger kids looked at me with awe. I was proof that the dream was real, that it was possible. For a small-town kid who'd never done anything remarkable, it was intoxicating. I was somebody. I mattered. I was going to Brooklyn, New York, to serve at the world headquarters. I was going to be part of the machine that printed millions of magazines, that sent truth to the ends of the earth. They threw a going-away party for me at the Kingdom Hall 3 weeks before I left. People brought food, casseroles, salads, desserts. There was a cake with "Congratulations, David," written in blue frosting. They collected money for me, nearly $300, which felt like a fortune. They gave me cards with encouraging scriptures written inside. Brother Harris, one of the elders, gave a talk. He talked about my baptism when I was 12, about how I'd always been zealous, always regular. He talked about sacrifice and faithfulness and putting Jehovah first. He made me sound like some kind of spiritual giant. I wasn't. I was just a kid who'd drunk the Kool-Aid completely. But there was something else, too. Something I didn't fully recognize at the time. There was pressure. Not the overt kind. No one said, "Don't mess this up." But it was there, silent and heavy. I was now the congregation's golden boy. I was the proof that their way of life worked. If I failed, if I came back, if I got discouraged or disillusioned, it wouldn't just be my failure. It would be a crack in the narrative. So I couldn't fail. I couldn't doubt. I couldn't even admit to myself that I was scared. Because I was terrified, actually. I'd never been out of Pennsylvania. I'd never lived away from my parents. I'd never been in a city. New York seemed enormous and loud and overwhelming. I'd seen it in movies, but that felt like fiction. The reality of actually going there, actually living there, felt impossible. But I couldn't say that. So I smiled. I thanked everyone. I accepted the gifts and the cards and the money. I gave a little speech about how honored I was, how I couldn't wait to serve. And I pretended I was ready. My last week at home was a blur. My mother packed my suitcase, 2 changes of work clothes, some casual clothes, toiletries, my Bible, a few personal items. That was it. I didn't need much. Bethel provided housing, meals, laundry. Everything was taken care of. All I had to bring was myself. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, my stomach churning with anxiety and excitement. I kept thinking about what was waiting for me. I kept praying, asking Jehovah to give me strength, to help me be humble, to help me serve well. I promised him I wouldn't waste this opportunity. I had no idea what I was promising. The bus ride from Pennsylvania to New York City took about 6 hours. My father drove me to the Greyhound station in the morning. We didn't talk much. He's never been good with emotions. But when we got to the station, when I grabbed my bag from the trunk, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Make us proud, son." "I will, Dad. And remember, you're serving Jehovah now. Not men. Jehovah. I know. Don't let anything distract you." "I won't." He hugged me. Brief. Awkward. Then he left. I boarded the bus and found a seat by the window. Most of the passengers looked tired, worn down. A mother with 2 young kids. An old man who smelled like cigarettes. A college-aged guy with headphones in, head leaning against the window. I sat by myself, watching the landscape change. Rolling hills giving way to highways, small towns giving way to industrial sprawl. Farms. Gas stations. Rest stops. Mile after mile of America passing by the window. I had a knot in my stomach the whole time. Excitement mixed with fear. Anticipation mixed with homesickness. I hadn't even left yet. I kept thinking about what was waiting for me. I'd seen pictures of the Bethel buildings. Massive brick structures. Factories. Dormitories. The Watchtower sign visible from the Brooklyn Bridge. It all seemed so grand, so important, so much bigger than me. And I kept thinking about the responsibility. I was representing my family, my congregation, Jehovah. I couldn't fail. I couldn't be weak. I couldn't be the kid who went to Bethel and came running back home. I prayed a lot on that bus. Silently, in my head. I asked Jehovah to give me strength, to help me be humble, to help me serve well. I promised him I wouldn't waste this opportunity. I promised him my whole life. I meant it. When the bus finally pulled into the Port Authority terminal in Manhattan, the noise hit me first. Honking. Sirens. People yelling. Hundreds of people rushing past each other, not making eye contact, just moving. The smell of exhaust and street food and garbage and humanity packed too close together. I felt overwhelmed immediately. I'd arranged to be picked up by a brother who worked in the transportation department at Bethel. His name was Frank. He was in his 50s, stocky, with graying hair and a firm handshake. He found me standing by the information desk, clutching my suitcase, probably looking terrified. "Brother Keller?" "Yes." "Hi. Welcome to New York. Let's get you to Bethel." He didn't say much, just helped me with my bag and led me through the terminal, down the stairs, to a white van parked in a loading zone. The drive to Brooklyn was surreal. I stared out the window at the buildings, the traffic, the sheer density of everything. So many people. So much noise. So much life. Frank made small talk, asked where I was from, how the trip was, if I'd ever been to New York before. But mostly we rode in silence. I think he could tell I was nervous. And then, finally, we turned a corner, and there it was. Bethel. The buildings rose up in front of me, solid and imposing. Red brick. White trim. The Watchtower sign glowing in the afternoon light. People walking in and out, purposeful and quick. Everything looked clean, orderly, efficient. Frank pulled up to one of the dormitory buildings and helped me unload my bag. "Welcome to Bethel, brother," he said. "Your room is on the 4th floor. Someone will meet you in the lobby and show you around." "Thank you." He drove away. And I stood there for a moment, alone, staring up at the building I'd dreamed about for years. This was it. I'd made it. I was here. I felt a strange mix of triumph and terror. I picked up my suitcase and walked inside. The first few days at Bethel were overwhelming. Everything was new. Everything was regimented. There was a schedule for everything. Wake up, breakfast, morning worship, work assignments, lunch, more work, dinner, evening activities, lights out. No deviation. No downtime. Every minute accounted for. I was assigned to a room with 3 other brothers. Room 412. Bunk beds. Small lockers for our belongings. One window that looked out onto another building. We had a shared bathroom down the hall with 6 sinks, 3 showers, 3 stalls. Everything was functional. Clean. Spartan. My roommates were friendly enough. One was from Texas, a guy named Randy who'd been there for 3 years. One was from Ohio, Tim, just arrived like me. One was from Canada, Pierre, quiet, kept to himself. We bonded quickly over being new, over being overwhelmed, over trying to figure out how everything worked. The Bethel routine was strict. Military strict. Wake up was at 6 a.m., a buzzer in the hallway that jolted you awake. Breakfast at 6:30 in the main dining hall. Morning worship at 7 o'clock, 15 minutes of Bible reading and comments from one of the governing body members or a senior brother piped in over speakers. Then work from 7:30 to 12 o'clock. Lunch. Work again from 1 to 5 o'clock. Dinner at 6 o'clock. Then you had the evening to study, attend meetings at local kingdom halls, or rest. Lights out was at 10 o'clock, officially. They didn't enforce it strictly, but the culture was clear: early to bed, early to rise. It was military in its precision. And I loved it. At first. There was something comforting about the structure. You didn't have to think about what to do next. You just followed the schedule. You did your job. You showed up. You served. I was assigned to the bindery, The department that assembled and bound the Watchtower and Awake. Magazines. It was housed in Factory Building 1, a massive structure full of industrial machinery. The work was physical and repetitive. You stood at a machine for hours, feeding paper, checking quality, stacking finished products. It was loud, the constant hum and clank of presses and binders. It smelled like ink and glue and paper dust. Your hands got dirty. Your back ached after the first week. But I felt proud doing it. Every time I picked up a stack of finished magazines, I thought about how many people all over the world would read them. How many lives would be changed by the words printed on these pages? I was part of that. A small part, sure. A tiny cog in a massive machine. But still, I mattered. The brothers and sisters I worked with were kind. Most of them had been there for years. Some for decades. They knew the rhythm. They knew the machines. They knew how to navigate the unspoken rules. Because there were rules. So many rules. Not just the official ones. No smoking, no drinking, no worldly entertainment, no dating without permission, but the unspoken ones. The cultural codes you had to learn. Don't complain. Ever. If you're tired, push through. If you're sick, you better be really sick before you call in. If you have a problem with your roommate, work it out quietly. If you disagree with a decision, keep it to yourself. If an overseer gives you a task, you do it immediately, no questions. There was a hierarchy. Oh, there was. Even though we were all supposed to be equal, all brothers and sisters serving Jehovah together, there were clear lines. The governing body at the top, untouchable, almost mythical. Then the department overseers. Then the longtimers, the ones who'd been there 20, 30 years. And then people like me at the bottom. The new ones. The expendable ones. You learned quickly not to question. Not to complain. Not to rock the boat. I remember one morning during my second week. I was running late, overslept by 10 minutes. I rushed to get ready, skipped breakfast, ran to Factory Building 1. I was 5 minutes late to my station. My overseer, Brother Mitchell, a stern man in his 60s, called me over. "Brother Keller, you're late." "I'm sorry, Brother Mitchell. I overslept. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Tardiness shows a lack of respect for Jehovah's time. "Yes, sir. Yes, Brother Mitchell." He walked away. I felt my face burning. Randy, one of the brothers I worked next to, leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry about it. He's strict with everyone at first. You'll get used to it." But the interaction stuck with me. Because it wasn't just about being late. It was about the message underneath. You're replaceable. There are 1,000 other brothers who would love to have your spot. Don't give us a reason to send you home. And I never wanted to go home. So I adapted. I woke up earlier. I worked harder. I said yes to everything. For a while, I believed I was thriving. The work at Bethel was hard. Not just physically, though it was that too. It was mentally and emotionally draining. The days were long. The expectations were high. And there was this constant, underlying pressure to be grateful, to be humble, to never, ever complain. I worked in the bindery for 3 years straight. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes more when there were special projects or deadlines. Standing, lifting, sorting, feeding paper into machines, checking for defects, stacking magazines onto pallets. It sounds simple, monotonous, and it was. But it was also exhausting. My hands developed calluses within the first month. Thick, rough patches on my palms from handling thousands of magazines every day. My shoulders ached constantly from the repetitive motion. I developed chronic back pain by the time I was 25, a dull throb that never really went away, even when I lay down at night. But you didn't talk about that. Pain was part of the sacrifice. Suffering was proof of dedication. If you were tired, you pushed through. If you were hurt, you sucked it up. Because there was always someone working harder, someone who'd been there longer, someone who never complained. I remember one brother, Tom, who'd been at Bethel for 15 years. He worked in the laundry department, managing industrial washers and dryers all day. The heat in there was brutal, 90, 100 degrees in the summer. The noise was deafening. He had permanent hearing damage from years of exposure. But he'd smile and say, "I wouldn't trade this for anything. I'm serving Jehovah." And I believed him. I wanted to be like him. So I worked harder. I volunteered for extra shifts. I stayed late when they needed help. I said yes to everything. There were Saturday work assignments sometimes, special projects, maintenance, deep cleaning. Technically optional, but not really. If you didn't volunteer, people noticed. So I did it. Every time. I think, deep down, I was trying to prove something. To Jehovah. To the organization. To myself. I wanted to be indispensable. I wanted to be the kind of brother they pointed to and said, "That's what faithfulness looks like." But the truth is, no one was indispensable. Brothers came and went all the time. Some stayed a year. Some stayed 5. Some stayed their whole lives. But the work went on. The machines kept running. The magazines kept getting printed. You were just a cog. Replaceable. It took me a long time to realize that. I was 28 when I finally started thinking seriously about marriage. Up until that point, I'd been too focused on work, too busy, too convinced that I didn't need a relationship to be complete. The organization taught us that singleness was a gift, that it freed you up for service. And I'd internalized that message completely. But as I got older, as I watched other brothers pairing off, as I attended wedding after wedding at local kingdom halls, I started to feel something I couldn't quite name. Loneliness, maybe. Or just the biological pull toward companionship that no amount of spiritual discipline could completely suppress. There were single sisters at Bethel. Not many, the ratio was probably 3 brothers for every sister, but some. And there were strict rules about courtship. You couldn't just date casually. You had to have serious intentions. Marriage. You had to get permission from your overseer before even asking a sister out. You had to be discreet. And if things didn't work out, it could be awkward because you still lived and worked in the same complex. I met Rebecca in the dining hall. She worked in the laundry department, one of the few positions available for sisters at Bethel. She was 25, from Ohio, quiet, serious, dedicated. She had this way of moving through the world that was calm and purposeful. She didn't draw attention to herself. She just served. We started talking after morning worship one day. Small conversations at first. She asked where I was from. I asked how long she'd been at Bethel. 4 years, she said. She liked it. She felt blessed to be there. Those conversations grew longer. We'd sit at the same table during meals sometimes. We'd talk about the scripture reading that morning, about our work assignments, about our home congregations. Safe topics. Appropriate topics. After a few months, I realized I liked her. More than liked her. I felt comfortable around her in a way I hadn't felt around anyone in years. She understood what it meant to be at Bethel. She shared the same values. The same dedication. I asked my overseer for permission to court her. He asked if my intentions were serious. I said yes. He said, "Make sure you're ready for the responsibility of marriage. Don't rush into anything." I wasn't rushing. I was almost 30. By witness standards, I was getting old. We courted for 6 months. Chaperoned dates, always. Walks around the Brooklyn Heights promenade. Meals in the dining hall. Once, we took the subway to a museum on our day off, the Museum of Natural History. We walked through the exhibits, talked about creation, about how amazing Jehovah's design was. Everything tied back to the organization. Even our romance. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. There was no electricity, no passion, no sense of being swept away by emotion. But it felt right. Appropriate. We were both serving Jehovah. We both wanted the same things. That seemed like enough. I proposed in the courtyard outside the residence building. Simple. I didn't have money for a ring. Bethel workers received a small monthly allowance, barely enough for personal expenses. But she said yes anyway. She cried a little. Happy tears, I think. We got married when I was 29 and she was 27. Small wedding. Saturday afternoon at the Kingdom Hall in Brooklyn Heights. About 50 people. Some family who traveled up from Pennsylvania and Ohio, some friends from Bethel, a few brothers and sisters from the local congregation. Rebecca wore a simple white dress she'd borrowed from another sister. I wore my best suit, the one I'd brought from home 8 years earlier, starting to wear at the elbows. We exchanged vows. The elder who performed the ceremony gave a 20-minute talk about marriage being an illustration of Christ's relationship with the congregation. We signed the papers. People clapped. Someone brought a sheet cake from a bakery. No honeymoon. We both had to be back at work on Monday. That's just how it was. We were assigned a small married couple's apartment in one of the buildings. Studio, basically. One main room with a bed, a small table, 2 chairs. Kitchenette with a mini fridge, a hot plate, a microwave. Shared bathroom down the hall. The walls were thin. You could hear conversations from neighboring apartments, footsteps above you, plumbing groaning in the walls. It was tight. But we made it work. We didn't have much. Didn't need much. Our lives were at Bethel. Everything was provided. And then there was the question of children. We talked about it. Of course we did. It came up naturally in those early months of marriage. Rebecca wanted kids. I could see it in her eyes when we'd visit congregations and she'd watch the young mothers with their babies. She'd get this wistful look. But there was this pervasive attitude at Bethel, never officially stated, but always implied, that having children was complicated. Not forbidden, but discouraged. Strongly. The reasoning was always the same. The end was so close. Why bring children into a dying world? Why create responsibilities that would pull you away from full-time service? Why burden yourself when paradise was right around the corner? And there were practical considerations, too. Bethel housing wasn't designed for families with children. If you had a baby, you'd likely be sent back to your home congregation. You'd lose your privilege of service. You'd be choosing family over Jehovah. I remember one conversation with an older couple, the Johnsons. They'd been at Bethel for 25 years, married for 30. They'd never had children. I asked them once, carefully, if they ever regretted it. Brother Johnson looked at me and said, "Regret? No. We've been able to focus completely on theocratic work. That's what matters." But Sister Johnson didn't say anything. She just smiled. A sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rebecca and I talked about it several times in those first years. She'd bring it up tentatively. "Do you think we should? Should we think about having children?" And I'd say, "Let's wait. Let's see what happens. The end is so close. We don't want to miss out on this privilege." So we postponed. We said, maybe later. Maybe after things settle down. Maybe in the new world. Years passed. We kept postponing. And then suddenly, it wasn't a choice anymore. Rebecca was in her late 30s. I was in my early 40s. Her doctor told her that getting pregnant would be difficult now. High risk, even if it happened. The window had closed. The decision had been made for us by our own inaction, our own fear, our own blind faith that we had all the time in the world because the new world was coming any day. We never talked about it after that. Not really. But I could see it in her eyes sometimes. When we'd visit congregations and see families with little kids. When we'd go to assemblies and watch children playing in the grass during lunch breaks. When we'd hear announcements about baby showers or first birthdays. There was this unspoken grief between us. This hole we'd both agreed to dig and now had to live in forever. I told myself it was worth it. That we were making sacrifices for Jehovah. That we'd have children in the new world. Perfect children who'd never get sick, never rebel, never die. But deep down, I was starting to wonder if the new world was ever coming. Around my mid-30s, things started to shift. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just little things. Little cracks in the foundation I'd built my entire life on. I started noticing how people were treated. How brothers and sisters who'd given years, decades, to Bethel were suddenly asked to leave. No explanation. No warning. No gratitude. Just, thank you for your service. The organization is restructuring. You need to return to your home congregation. I saw it happen to couples who'd been there for 20, 30 years. People who'd arrived young and given their whole lives. They'd get called into an office one day, told the organization was downsizing, and within a month they'd be gone. No retirement plan. No pension. No job prospects. No skills. Just dismissed. And the official line was always the same: Jehovah is reorganizing his work. We need to trust him. This is a blessing in disguise. But I started to wonder, where was Jehovah in this? Why were loyal, faithful people being cast aside like they didn't matter? Like they were disposable? There were other things too. Little things that started to add up. The way money was handled. Bethel had this vow of poverty. You received a small monthly allowance, maybe $14 when I started, eventually raised to $25. That was it. Everything else was provided. You were supposed to trust that Jehovah would take care of you. But then you'd see construction projects that cost millions. New buildings. Renovations. State-of-the-art equipment. And you'd wonder, where's all that money coming from? The worldwide work contributions. Sure. But why were we living like monks while the organization built bigger and bigger facilities? I'm not saying it was wrong, necessarily. But it made me uncomfortable. The disparity. The control. And the way decisions were made. Everything came from the top down. The governing body decided. The department overseers implemented. The workers obeyed. There was no input from below. No democracy. No discussion. If you had a suggestion, you could submit it. But nothing ever changed. The answer was always, we appreciate your input, but the current arrangement is directed by Jehovah. Jehovah. That word was used to shut down every question, every doubt, every concern. I remember one incident that really bothered me. A young brother, his name was Kevin, maybe 22, had some kind of emotional breakdown. He'd been pushing himself too hard, wasn't sleeping well, wasn't eating. He was so desperate to prove himself, to be faithful, that he'd ground himself down to nothing. He started having panic attacks at his workstation. Full-blown anxiety attacks. Hyperventilating. Shaking. Couldn't breathe. I thought they'd help him. Get him to see a doctor. Give him time off. Provide counseling. Instead, they sent him home. Within a week. They said he wasn't mentally stable enough to serve at Bethel, that the pressure was too much for him, that he needed to work on his relationship with Jehovah before he could return. He was devastated. Humiliated. He felt like he'd failed Jehovah. But he hadn't failed. The system had failed him. The system that demanded perfection, that pushed young people to their breaking point, that offered no safety net when they fell. I tried to talk to an older brother about it once. Brother Davis. He'd been at Bethel for 30 years. I respected him. Trusted him. I said carefully, Brother Davis, doesn't it seem harsh? The way Kevin was treated? Doesn't it seem like we could do more to help brothers who are struggling? He looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. Pity mixed with warning. Concern mixed with disappointment. And he said, Brother Keller, you need to be careful. Questioning how the organization handles things is dangerous. It's the beginning of apostasy. Remember what happened to Korah when he questioned Moses' authority. The earth swallowed him up. The organization is directed by Jehovah. If you can't see that, you need to examine your own heart. Korah, the Israelite who rebelled against God's appointed leadership and was destroyed. The ultimate cautionary tale. The bogeyman used to silence any dissent. I shut up after that. I swallowed my doubts. I told myself I was being ungrateful, that I didn't have all the facts, that the organization knew better than I did. But the doubts didn't go away. They just went underground. Festering. Growing. Multiplying. I started noticing other things. The way certain brothers were favored. The way some people got promotions, got better assignments, got special treatment. And it wasn't always based on spirituality or dedication. Sometimes it was just about who you knew. Who liked you. Who you played politics with. Bethel was supposed to be different. Pure. Free from the worldly corruption of favoritism and nepotism. But it wasn't. It was just another organization run by imperfect men. Men with egos. Men with agendas. Men with blind spots. And yet we were told, constantly, relentlessly, that this was Jehovah's organization. That to question it was to question God himself. The cognitive dissonance started to eat at me. But I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't leave. Where would I go? What would I do? My entire identity was wrapped up in being a Bethel worker. My entire social network was here. My wife was here. My purpose was here. So I stayed. And I ignored the cracks. And I kept working. And I kept pretending everything was fine. The years blurred together after that. 40s became 50s. 50s became 60s. I kept working. I kept serving. I kept attending meetings at local kingdom halls, going out in service on weekends, smiling, nodding, saying the right things. But inside, I felt hollow. The end never came. Year after year, assembly after assembly, convention after convention, we were told it was close. Imminent. Just around the corner. This generation will not pass away. The time remaining is reduced. Armageddon is at the door. But it never happened. The world kept turning. People kept living. Governments kept functioning. The United Nations kept existing, even though we'd been told it would turn on religion any day now. And I kept waiting. My body started to break down. The years of physical labor took their toll. My back pain became chronic. I developed arthritis in my hands. My shoulders ached all the time. I had to take ibuprofen just to get through the workday. I was moved from the bindery to a lighter duty position, inventory management. Less physical, more administrative. It was a relief in some ways. But it also felt like a demotion. Like I was being put out to pasture. I watched younger brothers arrive at Bethel full of zeal, just like I'd been. Fresh-faced. Idealistic. Ready to give everything. They'd show up with their suitcases and their Bibles and their burning conviction that they were doing the most important work in the universe. And I wanted to warn them. I wanted to pull them aside and say, be careful. Don't give up everything. Don't postpone your life. Don't make the same mistakes I did. But I didn't. Because that would have been discouraging. That would have been apostasy. That would have been poisoning their faith. So I kept quiet. And I watched them make the same choices I'd made. And I felt sick. Rebecca and I grew distant. Not in a dramatic way. We didn't fight. We didn't hate each other. We just existed side by side. Two people who'd sacrificed so much for the same cause that we'd forgotten to build a relationship beyond it. Our conversations were mostly functional. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? What time is the meeting tonight? We need to buy toilet paper. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about regrets. We didn't talk about the life we could have had. We went through the motions. We attended meetings. We smiled at people. We gave our talks at the Kingdom Hall. We went out in service. We did everything we were supposed to do. But the passion was gone. The joy was gone. It was just routine. Obligation. Going through the motions because we didn't know how to do anything else. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, Rebecca asleep beside me, and think about the life I could have had. If I'd gone to college. If I'd pursued a career. If I'd had children. If I'd built something for myself instead of pouring everything into an organization that would forget me the moment I was gone. I'd think about Michael, my childhood friend who'd gone to college. I'd lost touch with him completely. But I'd heard through the grapevine that he'd become an engineer, that he'd gotten married, had 3 kids, owned a house, lived a normal life. And I'd feel this crushing sense of loss. Not for what he had, exactly, but for what I didn't. For the choices I'd made. For the time I could never get back. And then I'd feel guilty for thinking that way. Selfish. Ungrateful. Weak. I'd pray. Ask Jehovah to forgive me for doubting. Promise to do better. Try harder. Be more faithful. But the thoughts kept coming. And they got louder. And harder to ignore. I started to realize that I'd put my entire life on hold waiting for something that might never happen. I'd sacrificed my youth, my potential, my relationships, my future, all for a promise that kept getting postponed. Soon. That's what they always said. Soon. But soon never came. And I was 60 years old. And my body was breaking down. And I had nothing. No savings. No career. No children. No legacy. Just 50+ years of waiting for an end that never arrived. I was 67 when they told me it was time to leave. 67 years old. I'd been at Bethel for 45 years. Almost half a century. The conversation was brief. An overseer, not even someone I knew well, just a younger brother in his 40s who'd been assigned to handle personnel, called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. "Brother Keller, thank you for coming in. Please, sit down." I sat. My heart was already racing. "You didn't get called into an office unless something was wrong." "I'll get straight to the point," he said, not making eye contact, shuffling papers on his desk. "The organization is going through a restructuring period. We're making some difficult decisions about staffing. We've determined that your position is being eliminated." I stared at him. "Eliminated?" "Yes. We appreciate your many years of faithful service. You've been an example to many. But we need to make room for younger brothers who can handle the physical demands of the work." Physical demands. I was in inventory. I sat at a desk most of the day. "How long do I have?" My voice sounded strange, distant. 30 days. We'll provide you with a reference letter and a small stipend to help with your transition. You'll need to coordinate with your home congregation for housing assistance." 30 days. 45 years of service. 30 days to pack up and leave. Is there anything I could do differently? Any other position I could? The decision has been made. I'm sorry. It's nothing personal. Jehovah is directing his organization in new ways. Jehovah. There was that word again. I walked out of that office in a daze. I didn't go back to my workstation. I just walked. Around the complex. Through the courtyards. Past the buildings I'd worked in for decades. I felt numb. Empty. Like I'd been punched in the stomach and couldn't catch my breath. When I told Rebecca that evening, she cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Just quiet tears running down her face while she sat at our small table. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "I don't know." "Where are we going to go?" "I don't know." We had no plan. No savings. Bethel workers didn't make enough to save. No retirement fund. No house waiting for us somewhere. My parents were dead. Her parents were in a nursing home in Ohio. We had nothing. The next 30 days were a blur. We packed our belongings, clothes, books, a few personal items. It all fit in 4 boxes and 2 suitcases. That's what we had to show for 45 years. There was no ceremony. No farewell party. No plaque or recognition or thank you. Just a few brothers shaking my hand in the hallway, saying, "Good luck, brother. Jehovah will bless you." One brother, someone I'd worked with for 20 years, said, "You must be excited to finally have your freedom." Freedom. As if I'd been in prison. As if leaving was a blessing. I wanted to scream at him. But I just smiled and nodded. On our last day, I walked through the complex one final time. The buildings. The courtyards. The dining hall where I'd eaten thousands of meals. The bindery where I'd worked for years. It all looked the same. The work continued. New brothers were already filling the positions of those who'd left. The machinery kept running. The magazines kept getting printed. We were already forgotten. We took a bus to Pennsylvania. Back to a state we'd left decades ago. To a congregation that didn't know us. To a tiny apartment we'd found online. 1 bedroom, 4th floor walk-up, $600 a month that we could barely afford. We moved in on a Saturday. 2 suitcases. 4 boxes. That was our life. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, a used mattress we'd bought from a thrift store, and said, "I thought we'd finish our service at Bethel. I thought we'd stay until Armageddon came." "Me too," I said. But Armageddon never came. And Bethel didn't want us anymore. We were 67 and 65 years old. And we were starting over with nothing. Adjusting to life outside Bethel was harder than I ever imagined. I'd spent 45 years in a controlled environment where everything was provided: housing, food, schedule, purpose, identity. Now, suddenly, I had to figure out how to live in the real world. I tried to find work. But who hires a 67-year-old man with no college degree, no professional experience, no marketable skills beyond operating a binding machine and managing inventory in a closed system? I applied everywhere. Hardware stores, grocery stores, warehouses, retail shops. Most places didn't even call back. A few did phone interviews, heard my age, and politely said they'd keep my application on file. I was too old, too slow, too expensive to insure, too much of a liability. Eventually, after 3 months of searching, I found part-time work at a warehouse distribution center. Minimum wage. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. 20 hours a week. The job was humiliating. I was older than everyone there. Supervisors, managers, everyone. I was slower than the younger workers. My back couldn't handle the lifting, even though the position was supposed to be light duty. I had to take breaks every hour just to stretch, and I could see the frustration in my supervisor's eyes. But I needed the money. So I swallowed my pride and kept showing up. Rebecca found work at a local thrift store. Part-time. She worked the register, sorted donated clothes, folded things, smiled at customers. She was good at it. Patient. But I could see the exhaustion in her face every evening. The weight of it all. We were both in our late 60s, working jobs that high school kids usually did, struggling to make rent and buy groceries. This wasn't how we thought we'd spend our final years. Between both our incomes and our small Social Security checks, we had just enough to survive. Barely. No savings. No cushion. One medical emergency away from financial disaster. We still attended meetings at the local Kingdom Hall. 3 times a week, like we'd always done. We still went out in service on Saturday mornings. We still did everything we were supposed to do. But it felt empty now. Hollow. We were going through the motions because we didn't know how to do anything else. The congregation was polite but distant. We were strangers. Outsiders. We had no history with these people, no shared experiences, no connections. We'd show up, sit in the back row, smile, leave. No one invited us over for dinner. No one asked about our lives. We were just 2 old people who'd appeared out of nowhere. I'd look around at the other members, the families, the young couples with babies, the kids running around, and I'd feel this overwhelming sense of loss. They had lives. Futures. Possibilities. We had nothing. I started comparing myself to people I'd grown up with. Michael, my childhood friend who'd gone to college against everyone's advice. I looked him up on social media once, something I'd been told was dangerous, worldly. But I did it anyway. He was retired. living in a nice house in suburban Pittsburgh. His profile was full of pictures, grandchildren, vacation photos, family gatherings. He looked happy, content, at peace. And me? I was working at a warehouse at 67, living in a cramped apartment that smelled like mildew, struggling to pay bills, my body falling apart, my marriage a shell of what it could have been. I'd thrown away every opportunity, every choice, every possibility. For what? For a promise that never came true. For an organization that discarded me the moment I was no longer useful. For a belief system that convinced me to sacrifice everything and gave me nothing in return. The worst part was watching Rebecca. Seeing what this had done to her. She never complained. Never said a word against the organization. But I could see it in her eyes. The sadness. The regret. The quiet despair. We'd both given everything. And we were both paying the price. I don't know when the anger turned to regret. Maybe it was gradual, over months and years. Maybe it was all at once, some random Tuesday morning when I woke up and realized I was 72 years old and had nothing to show for my life. But at some point, I stopped being angry at the organization and started grieving for myself. For the life I didn't live. For the person I could have been. For the time I can never, ever get back. It's not about money. People think that's what this is about, that I'm bitter because I'm poor. But it's not. I could live in poverty and be genuinely happy if I felt like my life had meant something. If I felt like I'd built something real, something lasting, something that mattered. But I didn't. I built nothing. I have nothing. I am nothing. I gave 45 years to an organization that forgot me in 30 days. The thing that hurts the most, the wound that never heals, is the children. Rebecca and I never had children. And that's on us. We made that choice. Or rather, we didn't make a choice. We just kept postponing until there was no choice left to make. We thought we had time. We thought the end was coming any day. We thought having children would be selfish, would interfere with our service, would tie us down when we needed to be free for Jehovah's work. And now it's too late. The window closed years ago. Rebecca is 71. I'm 73. We will die alone. No children to remember us. No grandchildren to carry on our legacy. No one to visit us in old age. No one to care when we're gone. We gave up the most fundamental human experience, creating and nurturing life, for an organization that doesn't even remember our names. I think about this a lot. Late at night when I can't sleep, when my back hurts too much to lie down comfortably, when Rebecca is asleep beside me and the apartment is quiet except for the sound of traffic outside. I think about the children we could have had. What they would have looked like. What kind of people they would have become. What they would have taught us. How they would have changed us. And I feel this crushing, suffocating grief. Not just for what we lost, but for what we never had. For what we were convinced didn't matter. I think about the dreams I had as a kid. Not Bethel, before Bethel. Before I was taught to suppress every ambition that wasn't directly related to the organization. I wanted to be a teacher once. I remember that. I was maybe 10 years old, and I liked helping other kids understand things. Math problems. Reading. I liked that moment when something clicked for someone, when their face lit up with understanding. But I was told that was worldly. That it was a waste of time. That the only teaching that mattered was teaching people about Jehovah. That working in Satan's system of education was spiritually dangerous. So I gave it up. Buried it. Convinced myself it didn't matter. And now I'll never know what I could have been. What kind of teacher I might have made. How many lives I might have touched. What legacy I might have left. I think about the relationships I never had. The friends I pushed away because they weren't witnesses or because they questioned the truth. The girl I liked in high school, Sarah, who I never pursued because I was too focused on being spiritual. I think about the experiences I never allowed myself. Travel, hobbies, exploration, learning for the sake of learning. All of it dismissed as worldly, as distractions, as temptations from Satan. And I realize now, I wasn't spiritual. I was afraid. Afraid of being ordinary. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid that if I didn't do something extraordinary, my life wouldn't matter. So I joined an organization that promised me meaning. That told me I was special. That convinced me I was part of something bigger than myself. That made me feel important. And I believed them. Completely. Totally. Without question. I gave them my youth. My potential. My relationships. My future. My everything. And what did I get in return? A 30-day notice when they didn't need me anymore. The regret is physical. It sits in my chest like a stone. It wakes me up at night. It makes it hard to breathe sometimes. I look at Rebecca across our tiny apartment, and I see the same thing in her eyes. We don't talk about it. We can't. It's too painful. Too raw. Too late. We made our choices. We believed what we were taught. We did what we thought was right. And we were wrong. I'm 73 now. Rebecca is 71. We're both in declining health. My back is shot. I need a cane some days. Rebecca's knees are bad. She can barely climb the stairs to our apartment. We both have high blood pressure. Take medications we can barely afford. We probably have 10 years left if we're lucky. Maybe 15. And I don't know what to do with the time I have left. I still believe in God. I do. That hasn't changed. But I don't believe in the organization anymore. I can't. Not after everything I've seen. Everything I've lost. Everything they took from me, not by force, but by manipulation. By convincing a naive 18-year-old kid that giving up his entire life was what God wanted. I've realized that faith and obedience to an institution are not the same thing. That serving God doesn't have to mean giving up your education, your dreams, your relationships, your future. That organizations run by men are just that. Organizations run by imperfect men with their own agendas and blind spots. But that realization came too late for me. If I could go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, that eager kid getting on the bus to New York with his whole life ahead of him, so convinced he was doing the right thing, I don't know what I'd say. Maybe I'd tell him to go to college, to study something that interests him, to build a career, to fall in love without asking permission, to have children, to travel, to make mistakes, to take risks, to live a normal, unremarkable, beautiful life. Or maybe I wouldn't say anything at all. Maybe he wouldn't listen anyway. Maybe he'd have to learn the hard way, just like I did. But if there are young people out there reading this, hearing this, thinking about giving their lives to Bethel or any organization that demands total sacrifice and promises eternal rewards, I'll say this. Be careful. Be so careful. Don't let anyone tell you that your dreams don't matter, that your education is worldly, that your relationships are distractions, that your future doesn't count because the end is coming soon. Your dreams matter. Your education matters. Your relationships matter. Your future matters. Don't postpone your life waiting for a promise that may never come. Don't sacrifice everything for an organization that will forget you the moment you're no longer useful to them. I know they'll tell you it's different, that you're serving God, that this is the most important work in the universe, that material things don't matter, that this life is temporary anyway, and maybe some of that is true. Maybe material things don't matter in the grand scheme. Maybe this life is temporary, but it's the only life you get. And once it's gone forever. Live your life. Build something. Create something. Love someone. Make mistakes. Take risks. Be ordinary. Be extraordinary. Be human. Have children if you want them. Don't let anyone convince you to wait for a paradise that might never come. Get an education. Learn things. Explore the world. Develop your talents. Form relationships. Real ones. Deep ones. With people who see you as more than a soldier in some cosmic war. Because you only get one life. One chance. One opportunity to be here, to experience this, to matter in small, meaningful ways. I gave mine away. Completely. Willingly. Eagerly. I gave it to an organization that promised me everything and gave me nothing. I spent 45 years waiting for an end that never came. Sacrificing for a reward I never received. Building nothing. Creating nothing. Leaving nothing behind. And now I'm 73 years old. And I'm tired. And I'm broken. And I have nothing. No children. No career. No savings. No legacy. Just regrets. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't give your life away to people who will throw you away the moment you're no longer useful. Don't trade your future for their promises. Don't be me. Please. Don't be me.